Today, I'm going to show you how I replace impulse jewels so you get a perfect installation every time. All right, well, in order to be able to reset an impulse pin, we're going to need to be able to get some shellac on it. So that's going to require us removing the double roller. So in order to do that, we need to remove the balance wheel and hairspring. So we start by loosening up the hairspring stud screw, and then we can just flip it over, take a probe, and push the hairspring stud right out of the balance cock. And now the balance wheel is free. So we'll start with removing the hairspring first. And before I remove the hairspring, I do want to mark the location of the hairspring stud in relationship to where it is positioned on the balance wheel. And that way we'll have a reference on where it needs to be replaced. Now, when we replace it, it's not going to be exact. We'll still have to adjust for the bead error, but there's really no way that you would be able to put it in the exact same location within a hundredth or maybe even a thousandth of a millimeter. So don't worry about it too much. Just you want to get it close, and that's about it. Now, to remove the hairspring, I just use my hand removing tools that I've polished to a very fine polish and sharpen the ends so they fit right under the collet, no problem. And just like we want a reference point for the hairspring, we do want to kind of get a visual to see what direction the impulse pin is pointing in relationship to the balance wheel, so we have a point of reference when we put it back on. Now, to remove the double roller, I'm going to be using my Candy staking set. Now, the one I have is the 18R, which is just the upgraded 18L Inverto set. And one of the things that I like about Invertos is that you can use either a stump or a stake in the bottom die plate, which really kind of expands the effectiveness of these particular staking sets. The other reason that I really like the 18R is because it has the two adjustable roller removers, which is what we're going to be using to remove this double roller. Using these adjustable roller removers are pretty straightforward. The stump actually fits into the largest hole on the die plate, so you can use any stake for this hole, and you just want to get the die plate centered, and then you tighten it up. Now, the way these work is the stump actually goes into the hole that we just lined up. And then it has this little collar that fits over the two jaws in the center of the stump and aligns with the center hole in the die plate. The reason it's adjustable is because as you turn the wheel counterclockwise, the jaws either open or close, and this is what makes it adjustable. The top part of the stump is flat, and the idea is that the roller table is going to be supported by the flat part of the stump. This is going to enable the balance staff to be pushed out of the stump to release it. Now, because it's adjustable and the way it was really designed is that you can hold the balance wheel and the roller table on top of the stump and turn it while you're looking at it as it's sitting on the staking set. But what I like to do is do it under the microscope so I can see it. What you don't want to do is you don't want to get it so tight that it's actually pushing down on the arm of the balance wheel, which is very simple to do. Now, to drive the balance staff out of the double roller, you're going to need a specially shaped punch. And the one I like to use is called the crosshole punch. Now, they're easy to identify in your staking set because you'll notice that there's a hole running through the tip. That's really there in case you get a pivot that's stuck in there. It helps you to get it out. Now, in the K&D set, there's 5 of these. And they start at number 7 and go up to number 11. 7 being the smallest, number 11 being the largest. Now, I think one of the biggest mistakes that new users of staking sets made is putting too much force on the watch part themselves. I think a lot of people that I've seen, the first thing they want to do is grab for that brass hammer. I learned from a very early age that that's way more force than is needed, and I prefer just using the backside of my tweezers. You may have to tap it a few more times than you would with a hammer, but the one thing you're not going to do is you're not going to bend or break anything if you're paying attention. So I would definitely recommend using the tweezer method. Now, the other thing you want to be careful of, obviously, is losing parts when you're removing them from a staking set. Right now, you can see that double roller is still sitting on top of the table, and I haven't quite located it yet, and now it just fell down. So be very careful. These parts are easy to lose, and if you touch it with the backside of your hand and move off your table, you're definitely going to lose it. So you want to be very mindful of where the parts are. Now, our next step is going to be to clean the parts, the impulse pin and the roller table, to remove any of the old shellac off them so they don't interfere when we re-shellac them. So to clean the impulse pin, I like to do it in these little dish of IPA alcohol. Actually, this is denatured alcohol in this one because it's a little hotter than IPA and it cleans a little bit better. So most of the shellac has already dissolved off the impulse jewel, but I'll just hold it with my tweezers and then I'll take a very sharp piece of pegwood and just rub it on the jewel. And I find that this is really one of the safest ways to do it because if it were to ping off, it's not going to go very far. Now, to clean the double roller itself, I just take that out and put it on a piece of watchmaker's paper. And then, again, taking the pegwood, just go over it and make sure there's no residue of the old shellac left on the metal itself. Once everything looks clean, then I just put them back into the denatured alcohol just to rinse off any of the wood fibers that may be on the roller or the jewel. So now with all our parts clean, we're ready to shellac the impulse stone in. So take the parts out of the denatured alcohol and we want to get them dry before we start adding in any shellac. be very mindful of where you put this impulse pin, because as you can see, it's very small and it will definitely get away from you if you're not paying attention. What I like to do is take my bench block and I'm going to put the roller table on the bench block. Now, the way I'm going to show you how to set this impulse jewel is the way I learned many years ago. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the bench block to help us set the impulse pin in the roller so that it sits flat and perpendicular to the table itself. So the first thing I want to do is just kind of get everything set up before I put the shellac in the hole where the impulse jewel is going to go. Now, one of the fiddliest parts about doing this is actually picking up the impulse jewel and getting it in the hole itself. As you can see, it's crescent shaped. So I have a little trick I'll show you. But first, we're going to take some of the liquid shellac that we made back in the video I did for setting pallet stones. And we're going to put just a little dab of this liquid shellac in our hole before we set the impulse jewel in. Now, there's a couple reasons I like to do it like this. One, it gives me a little bit more open time to work with it, because this liquid shellac is not going to get hard until I actually put some heat to it. Now, another little trick that I'll show you makes it real easy to set the impulse pin, and that's by taking a needling tool and just licking it, getting a little bit of spit on the tip of it, and then your impulse pin will stick to it very easily. And then you can maneuver it and stick it inside the hole. And because the shellac is still soft, it's going to stick in the hole. And then you can just use your tweezers to hold the double roller, and using another pair of tweezers or a probe or whatever you want. And then you can push the impulse pin. So now as you push down on the top of the impulse jewel, it will hit the bench block, and the flat side of the jewel will make it flat and perpendicular to the roller table. So now we're going to need to heat up the shellac to set it, and we're going to need to add a little bit more to the underside of the roller table so that it's set in place and is secure. So I have a tool for that, which you don't need to use, but it does come in handy. The problem with it is that it's spring-loaded. So what I've found is the safest way to install it into the tool is by using a very small smoothing broach to actually hold the roller table in place. And that way I can maneuver it into the tool so I don't have to worry about it flying, because this spring is pretty tight, and if it's not in the groove just perfectly, that thing will snap it off, and it would probably fly about 100 foot if I didn't have this pin in there. So that's how I like to set it into this tool. Now, this is made of brass. You don't want to directly put the roller table in a flame. If you remember the video I did on resizing the center coil of a mainspring, we actually tempered that. And if you put the roller table directly in there, it would apply too much heat to it, and you would actually start tempering or softening the roller table, and that's not something you want to do. Now, you can certainly find these tools on eBay, these vintage brass tools, but you don't really need one. To be quite honest with you, you could literally take a piece of quarter-inch, not even quarter-inch, eighth-inch brass plate and put a pair of vice grips on it, and then put your roller table on that and stick that over a flame, and it would do the same thing. So again, I'm using the liquid shellac, and I'm just applying a small dollop right on the underside of the impulse jewel. And that's what we're going to heat up, and it'll set and it'll hold and lock that in place. In my spirit lamp, I like to use denatured alcohol. I find that it burns very clean, doesn't leave a whole lot of soot behind. So it won't take long for it to bring this up to temperature, and then we'll just check it to see how well it flowed out. So when I first saw it, it has a little bit more shellac than is needed, so I just went ahead and chipped that off. And now with it back on the smoothing broach, I can inspect it to make sure that it's not only solidified and hard, but it's neat and it's holding the pin. Now, as we look at it from a side view, we want to make sure that the shellac bump is not too high. That might interfere with the running of the escapement, and this one looks just fine. But you also want to check and make sure that there's no shellac that's going to be on the sides of the impulse jewel that would interfere with the jewel going in and out of the pallet fork. So inspect that closely, and if there's anything on there, it should just peel right off. So when you're installing a double roller like this, there's two things you want to be aware of. The first is this space right here where the double roller seats tight against. You want to make sure there's no gap there between the roller and that spacer. Otherwise, your interaction between the impulse jewel and the pallet fork itself, or even the guard pin, will not be correct. And then, of course, the other thing is the space between the balance wheel arm and the die plate. If you were to try to drive the roller table on to the balance staff with the balance wheel in this position, you would crush the arm. So that needs to be supported underneath by either a stump, or you can use a punch, since we have an inverto staking set. So we're just going to look for a flat face hole punch that has a hole that's a little bit larger than the balance staff, and that one's going to go in the staking set. Now we're just going to lay the roller table back onto the balance staff in its correct orientation that we documented before we took it off. And then we're just going to grab another flat hole punch that is one size larger than the one underneath the balance wheel, and we'll lay it in position over the balance staff, and we're going to slowly tap on it again with our tweezers to slowly drive it home. Now look at this gap between the spacer and the bottom of the roller table. That's what I was talking about earlier. You just want to make sure that that's tight and you get it down all the way so it looks just like that. Now we need to press on our hairspring. So since we made a indication mark with the white out of the orientation of the hairspring stud, we can put the hairspring back on and just move it over to get it kind of in place where it needs to be. Now, since the arm for the balance wheel is now going to be flat on the die plate, when we press on the collet, all we really need to do is find a hole on the die plate that's just a little bit larger than the roller table so that it fits into the hole. And then we can use another flat hole punch, and we're just going to put it right on top of the collet, and we're going to use our tweezers again, and we're just going to give it a couple taps to seat it into place. And that's all there is to that. Now we can reinstall the balance wheel onto the balance cock. And this is just a matter of laying the balance wheel and hairspring into place and orienting the balance stud right over the hole where the balance stud screw is. Once I've got it lined up, I just use my needling tool, which is very, very thin, and I can just push through the hairspring. I can just push the stud into the hole, and then I'll take my screwdriver and just tighten up the screw, locking it in place. Go ahead and wind up the movement to a full wind, and then we can drop the balance wheel in. And hopefully it'll work. You can see the first attempt of putting the balance wheel in, I believe the impulse pin didn't get in the fork slot, so it's not even moving. But really, at this point, it's not moving at all. So I'm really not quite sure what the problem was. So I just decided to get a paintbrush to see if it's moving, and you can see that it's overbanked. So it's just a matter of pulling it out and moving the pallet fork back where it needs to be and reinstalling the balance wheel again. And there we go. We have life now. When I was troubleshooting this and we had the problem, the movement was actually running a little bit. The balance was oscillating a little bit, but that's because I hadn't put the screw in yet. So the real test is making sure that the balance cock is tight. And there we have it. The balance is now operating normally. And now we just need to adjust and regulate it. And we'll call this one good. Thanks for watching.